baton. Thanks, Divya. So I'm Jackie Davis. I'm a VP and Deputy General Counsel at VMware, and I am very excited to introduce our next session, which is Leading Like a Tech Entrepreneur with Mamtha Banerjee and Janis Machala. So you may be wondering, what does tech entrepreneurship have to do with joy? So for those of you who have been entrepreneurs, you know that being an entrepreneur puts the power of innovation in your hands. You have the freedom to fully contribute your ideas, pursue them relentlessly, change course if needed, and then pursue relentlessly again. And that power of innovation leads to amazing business results, but it also sparks personal and professional joy. So our speakers, Mamtha and Janis, today are here to share with us how we as leaders can harness that founder's mindset to be force multipliers for success and for joy within our organizations, whether large or small. Mamtha will focus on the doing of leading teams, and Janis will focus on the being of leadership. So without further ado, let me introduce them. First, Mamtha Banerjee, the Vice President of Technology at the Expedia Group. Mamtha is a tech entrepreneur and startup enthusiast who graduated from Techstars Seattle and previously founded 2 companies before she made a mid-career move from entrepreneurship to large enterprise. At Expedia, she leads the foundational capabilities, enabling first-party and third-party producers and consumers on Expedia's travel platform. She's a role model for building diverse and gender-balanced teams, as well as building high-performing product teams who can innovate at scale. Next, I'm delighted to welcome Janis Machala. Janis is a former startup CEO and corporate technology growth leader who now provides executive coaching to corporate innovators and entrepreneurs with big aspirations and vision. An ICF certified coach and one of the first 25 global coaches certified in positive intelligence, Janis has a special focus on women in tech who want to own their power, create a greater executive presence, and who want to make a big difference through high impact leadership. So Mamtha and Janis, thank you so much for joining us today. Please take it away.
Thanks, Jackie, for being like the most supportive and the most helpful moderator ever. Large companies with access to resources move slowly with like long release cycles and less innovation. Meanwhile, we have startups with like minimal resources, and they're able to ride the waves, take risks, and move mountains. How is this possible? For example, WhatsApp reached 1 billion users with a team of just about 50 engineers. And their number one lesson was to hire folks who were adaptable in many ways than one, and to be super focused without spending too much time getting distracted by other activities, technologies, and even meetings. So the speed of execution and decision-making is key. So how does one cut through the layers of decision-making at large companies? We will walk through some frameworks that we found valuable and use almost every day. Every problem is seen as an opportunity to a founder. And yes, the glass is always half full. And I've been accused of this all the time. So people with a founder mentality cannot rest once a problem is identified or an opportunity is identified. So they take on like personal responsibility without complaint or excuses. They learn and recruit new skills as needed and deliver results despite blockers. At my first startup, which was in a personal finance domain, I went from being a software engineer with like no background in marketing, no exposure to biz dev, finance, or fundraising, to building a product and in parallel working on marketing campaigns, closing biz dev deals, signing up folks for affiliate programs, working with investors, hiring for all these job families as well, and even running a large press conference. So I was constantly recruiting new skills to get to our vision. And I connect with Reid Hoffman's visual of a startup entrepreneur who's like jumping off a cliff, taking great risks. And for me, despite having acrophobia, and building a plane on the way down. And the approach we'll talk about today is also the lean startup approach. So I'm extending this lean startup approach of iterative development from like build, measure, learn to include integrate and test with early adopters as you build out your MVP. So for example, if you're building a monitoring solution for internal teams, sign up a few early adopters who are willing to work with you through the initial phases before you are even ready for a beta version of the tool or product. And if you're delivering a new product or a feature to external third-party partners, sign up pilot partners who are willing to integrate and test, and test out your features as you will get valuable early feedback. So at my previous startup, a video service for kids, before we officially launched our beta product, we had data and feedback from real customers. As we launched our first MVP app as a white label for a partner who had an existing customer base and an app platform as well. So through this MVP, we learned what it takes to launch an app for the specific market segment, measured what features worked and what didn't, and iterated before even our official launch. So using the lean startup approach, larger companies have a framework to test a vision continuously and iteratively. And by the time the product is ready to be distributed widely, it'll already have established customers. And learn how to tell great stories and sell your vision. As a leader and an influencer in an organization, these stories will help you influence your teams, your peers, your stakeholders, and capture your vision and enable you to execute. So your stories will capture their attention and remain in their heads, even after you're not in the room. So in addition, use multiple mediums to sell your vision. Always have an elevator pitch handy and tailor it based on the audience as well. So, and in addition, selling your vision is also key to recruiting as well. And as a leader, another aspect that I focus on a lot is to create a team of force multipliers with a shared vision, a strong sense of community. And in a startup, the founders, the team members have a really strong sense of community, right? A growth mindset and continuous learning, and having also having open communication, a sense of community and a flat hierarchy. And this brings out the joy of also operating as an entrepreneur. And in addition, just having fewer boundaries, less silos, and focusing more on problem solving versus processes also builds this culture of force multipliers. And who's your Yoda? At one point, I had access to over 100 mentors as a startup founder. For example, one helped us with press releases and another with marketing, pitches, biz dev. So you really need mentors who can guide you and give you advice in areas where you are not an expert. So with this, I will hand over to Janis, Machala, to learn more about leadership frameworks.
Great. Thank you, Mamtha. So I'm really excited to have this topic today because I think what, as women, especially, we get the ability to do is to, break glass and do things differently and be brave and try new things. And I became an executive coach after having been a business coach and worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. And I wanted to help women learn how to do things differently and to break through that glass ceiling or move into other roles. I love the job crafting concept. I did that a number of times in my career where I just completely reinvented my job because I wanted to do something different. And I saw a different need within the same organization. And I just kind of shifted into that. When people struggle to scale in an organization or in a job or in the area where they're at, what I find oftentimes is that they're focused on the money versus the mission. And that higher order mission is so critical to believing in yourself and really focusing on how you can make a difference. And that's where that growth, and I think Machala said that about the growth mindset and being really open to change and learning. And what happens when you become fixed in a role is you get stuck in this sort of negative part of your brain. And that's where you burn cortisol. That's where you're not your best self. That's where anxiety, depression, stress, all of those things play. And unfortunately, what happens then is people start feeling isolated, and they start not wanting to be in conflict or dealing with conflict, not wanting to take risk. All of the things that happen are happening because we're in this place in our brain that none of us want to be at, but we don't always know how to get out of. And that is, the place called our saboteurs. And this is a part of work that I do a lot today. And our saboteurs are those voices in our head that hold us back, that keep us in the negative part of our brain. And we all have something called the judge. And the judge is that person, that persona that tells us we're not good enough, we're not smart enough. And some people call it the inner critic. You've heard that probably talked about a lot. And this is the thing that leads to burnout, that leads to people not being happy. Frankly, it leads to the great resignation. So what I want you all to do, if you do one thing right now, is to take this free saboteur assessment and find out what saboteurs are driving you that might be holding you back from saying, I can't reframe my job. I can't do that thing. I can't be in a entrepreneurial tech job. My company's not going to let me do that. But you can, because when you shift from the negative part of your brain to the positive part of your brain, which you can learn to do, and you can basically combat those saboteurs, is you start believing in yourself. And you can build that sense of urgency. You can become passionate about your work. You can decide you're going to break the rules. The glass is half full. You become understanding that failure is a set of experiments. It isn't failure. I loved what Machala said about being okay with the idea that you learn to fail, and failure is good. It's not bad. So the entrepreneurial mindset is anything can happen because we're learning and we're growing. And from learning, you learn what to do and you learn what not to do. And in an organization, you create, as a leader, psychological safety in order to build the environment that people want to be able to be entrepreneurs and to innovate. And what I've been doing with Expedia, and what I find so gratifying with working with Mamtha and other leaders in her organization, is the ability to build teams that want to be like this. And what I've been hearing from the human resource organization is these teams are so different. How come they get so much done? How come they're all so happy? It's an interesting dichotomy that I keep hearing about is, what's the difference with this? What's the difference with these organizations? Well, the difference is they have allowed themselves the permission to do it differently and to buck the status quo. And it has been very freeing and very exciting and very impactful for their careers personally. And they found that missionary place to be. And it's the place that allows you to re-engage in your work and your career. So we have a couple of asks for you. Mamtha?
Yes. So I was just going to say, think about what's one step you can take. What is one thing you would do to work like an entrepreneur, build a team, and grow the leaders within your organization. And Janis.
So who are your saboteurs? What's the saboteur that maybe is holding you back from taking one of the steps that all of us speakers have talked about today? There's something here that probably calls to you, but there's probably some voice that's niggling at you that may be telling you, oh, I can't do that. Or, oh, that's not going to work at my company. So why don't you do that saboteur assessment and find out why you're hearing that voice?
Yes. And so how can this work at your company? If you can look at the frameworks that we talked about and spend some time on it, we would love to hear from you. And we are happy to take questions and also through the app as well. And the last thing, just you can do it.
Yes. Yes. And if there's interest, Mamtha and I have thought about having a little group convene and focus on talking about how to bring that kind of entrepreneurial leadership and team approach into your organizations, if there's an interest in that.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Mamtha and Janis. I see one hand up for Natalie. Did you have a question? I don't know if you can, I don't think you can unmute yourself. Oh, maybe you can. Let's see. You might have to chat your question, I'm afraid. So while Natalie's chatting her question, maybe I could ask one of the two of you. If you find yourself in an organization that does not have that entrepreneurial spirit, say you're the leader of a team within that kind of organization, what's a first step you take as that leader within that larger organization to start shifting the culture? Because I'm sure that can be quite intimidating if you're in a very hierarchical organization, for example.
Mamtha, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, I think I guess the two of us can do it. So one quick thing I was going to say is again, I have seen this happen. I have had other entrepreneurs who have been in teams where they have struggled. The advice I've always given is start with writing your vision down, right? And using, again, all the frameworks we've talked about, write your vision down, sell your story, tell your story, show some early successes, and bring people along. So a lot of it is what I would call like evangelism and advocacy for the outcomes. It's less about you, but more about the outcomes that you're bringing together, and how you're working and your approach towards it. And early wins will definitely get your managers or your stakeholders like listening to you.
Mm-hmm. I think it's getting buy-in from someplace in the organization. Sometimes it's taking a failed project and saying, let me try that. If it's failed, they don't have any choice but to say, okay, well, it can't get worse. And so sometimes it can just be taking something on that's perceived as hopeless, and saying, let me take a different approach. And all of a sudden it happens. because all of the things that got in the way of that hopeless project probably had to do with a lot of things that were organizational or political or took too long, missed the market window, all of those things. So you can always find that project that maybe you could save.
And I think we have time maybe for one more question. And it's related to what you were just speaking about, Janis and Mamtha. How do you get to the right layer of management? So if you're looking for that support in the organization, any recommendations on whether you go to your boss? Do you go to the very top? Like, how do you identify the right place to look for your sponsor, I guess, for that kind of change?
Yeah, so it's funny that, Jackie, you almost asked the same question. And so I would start with a combination of folks, right? Some of it could be one-on-ones with your manager, one-on-one with your manager's manager, one-on-one with some of the stakeholders. But when folks see the passion that you have, and know that you see the vision, you will be able to cut through all these bureaucracy and get to what you want to get to. But it is hard work. It's almost like my first days as an entrepreneur, and I'm doing these pitches with folks. They have no idea who you are, right? Why should anybody trust you, right? How do they know? You haven't actually even built the product yet, right? But so really showing that passion, that vision, and doing your homework and making sure you have your whole approach and strategy for what you want to work on or what you want to deliver. And once you get one or two initial early folks who are willing to be your backers, and that's when things start changing.
That's great. And thank you so much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. We had another question come in, but I'll follow up with our speakers afterwards. And, you did have a follow-up way to contact you, I think, that you shared. So perhaps you can follow up with any more questions through that channel. But first, I want to thank all of our speakers today, Manette, Machala, Mamtha, Janis. What a fantastic conversation, really interesting, illuminating, thought-provoking, challenging for all of us. Thank you all for attending the session today, and would like to encourage everyone, or just remind you, don't forget we have the closing keynote at 4:00 Pacific. So please join us for that as well. But thank you again to our speakers and for everyone who participated. Right, so long.